Dear presence, did you like the session? Now it will be followed by question and answer. We'll ask questions to our Prabhu. There are wireless available. Okay. We already got a question. And there were some written questions as well. Can we have the questions, please?
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for your wonderful presentation. This evening is really very fruitful to me. The way you define and explain spirituality, as well as the total meaning of spirituality, intelligence, and purifications, that's really meaningful to me. And I do believe that all of us here realized the intensity of the impact of spirituality. And really, the way you explain is a very thought-provoking lecture, no doubt. And it helped us to realize the way we should understand the God, the way we mean the God, the impact of God and role of God in our life. But you know this, with the general people, the general people are getting very confused sometimes. You know this, the way you say the spirituality, the philosophy and practice. And we are nowadays in the era of globalization and mass media, we are encountered by a lot of philosophies. And these philosophies are misguiding us or guiding us in a different way. The way you said, what really matters in life, that means that brings happiness in our life. So different philosophies are saying what really matters to bring happiness in your life. So if we are living in the era of globalizations, when we are facing a lot of philosophies, some philosophy says happiness lies in sacrifice. Some philosophy says happiness lies in consumptions. When we see the other peoples are growing, developing, like in developing world, the governments are focusing on work hard to grow in terms of material science. If you work hard, if you gain money, you will bring happiness for you and your family. On the other hand, when we make the alignment with what we feel matters and we really feel matters. That's if we follow a particular religious philosophy, for example, Bhagavad Gita, the way it's explained us to live our life, that says, right, what really matters. But when we are guided by the economics, society, the way our society leading us, we compare with other selves. Like Americans have that, we must have that. Otherwise, we cannot get that happiness. We love to go to USA for making money to send it back to country to make the people happy in our society. So under such circumstances, I'm really asking you, like the way you started with the philosophy, psychology, and science of explaining the spirituality and the life.
So let me summarize the question. And then so you want to complete it?
I'm
just got the question.
Yeah, you just continue, please, with that. I'm also confused with that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So broadly, I got 3 points in your question. First is that there are so many different. Can have a seat, please? There are so many different philosophies in the world. And especially in the Western world, we see there is so much progress. And they're not necessarily spiritual. They focus on material progress. And we also feel that when there's material progress, then without that we cannot be happy. So how does a person find their way through all this confusion? One thing about Bhagavad Gita is that the Bhagavad Gita is in no way against material progress. It is against material progress becoming the sole definition of progress. That we are, while we are spiritual beings, we are also in physical bodies. And physical bodies need a certain level of requirements and conveniences for functioning. And there's absolutely nothing wrong in acquiring that. The Gita says, Yuktahara viharasya. That our body need to be taken care of in an appropriate, adequate way. So, if we consider progress, definitely within that, material progress has a part to it. When Arjuna went to his Gurukul, he studied archery. And by that study, he became better and better in archery. So he progressed materially in terms of his archery expertise. So the material world works according to certain principles. So if we look at the Western world, in the last 10 years, I have spent almost more than half of the year in the Western world, speaking and talking and sharing spirituality over there. And two things. First, I noticed is that the level of material thought and organization that is there in the Western world is far, far more than what in the Eastern, say the Indian subcontinent, which is where I have lived and grown. So, in general, we humans, wherever we invest our energy, there we will progress. So, humanity, especially in the Western world, has invested its energy in the material domain and it has progressed phenomenally. And that, rather than denying or downplaying or deriding that, we just acknowledge that humans have the capacity to make a change. So material, when energy is invested in the material domain, we'll progress in the material domain. At the same time, the second thing that has struck me is there are so many mental health problems. And in fact, to the extent Indians or Asians, they go to the West and they become prosperous, to that extent their mental health problems also increase. The same people, Asians who are in India, whether it's Indians, Chinese, Bangladeshi, whoever, they, as long as they're here, they do not seem to have that many mental health problems. But they go there, it becomes more. So the problem is that material progress does not lead to all-round progress. And that is why the Western world is more and more becoming open to Eastern spirituality. There's a book written by Philip Goldberg called The American Veda. So I met him also when I was in America, and he's talking about how into the heartland of America, Eastern spiritual practices, especially Indian spiritual practices, be they yoga, be they mantra chanting, be they... Now Kirtan is like a music category in itself. And people pay a fortune to to attend musical concerts. So why is all this spirituality being explored? Yoga is so huge in the Western world. Almost 1 in every 4th person in the West has done some course in yoga. How much they practice is secondary, but almost 1 in 10 or 1 in 15 people do practice something also. So why? Because again, the point is, material progress alone does not lead to happiness. So we can go to both extremes, Material progress is everything. That's the Western conception. And that is clearly false. But then the other side, you can go and say material progress is nothing. Now, this is a distortion of spiritual teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. What the Gita says is that if we want human progress, so in human progress, material progress can be one aspect of it. But along with that, we humans, along the physical side, we have a mental side. Then we have a spiritual side. So all three need to progress. If all three are progressing, then that's when our progress will be holistic and sustainable. So the Gita offers us a holistic worldview. That's why I said spirituality. I didn't say spirituality is the study of the spiritual. It is the study of what matters. So material progress matters, physical conveniences and comforts matter, but our inner state of mind matters, and our spiritual well-being matters. So a philosophy, there can be many philosophies in the world, but a philosophy that integrates various aspects of reality and places them in a hierarchy and harmony. That is what I have found in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, Prabhuji, we got some questions written here. Dear audience, if you want to share your questions, there are sheets available with our Prabhus, our volunteers. Please collect from the Prabhus. Prabhuji, may I read the question to you?
Yes, please.
It's about reincarnation. As far as we know, the concept about rebirth is discussed only in Hindu religion. Why other religion did not discuss about rebirth, reincarnation? Please discuss briefly about reincarnation, which is confusing to many of us. Confusing to many of us.
Okay. So firstly, I'm not sure whether reincarnation is discussed only in Hinduism. It's definitely discussed in Buddhism. It's discussed in Jainism. And even in Christianity, there are clearly references to that. When a baby is born blind, when a child is born blind, Jesus asks that, he asks as follows, why was this child born blind? Is it because of the parents' misdeeds or the baby's misdeeds? Now, unless there is some understanding that the baby existed before, what misdeed could the baby have done? Did the baby just fold its legs wrong inside the womb and that's why it was born blind? That's absurd. So, there are references. Now, the concept of reincarnation is explained elaborately in the Vedic tradition, because the Vedic tradition centers on sages who have dedicated their life to spiritual growth. With all due respects, the Bible, if you consider the Old Testament, is basically the story of the chosen people, who the followers from Egypt who later became Jews, and their adventures. And the prophet, there is no very serious philosophical discussion about the nature of reality. It is a book of miraculous interventions of God in his chosen people's lives. And in the New Testament, the Bible is again basically a book about primarily the Gospels, which are Jesus' life story, and then the epistles of Paul, which are basically his instructions to how you can live a life faithful to Jesus' teachings. So there is not much serious philosophical discussion. So there are Christian philosophers who have said, Alistair MacGregor is one, who has said that the idea of reincarnation is completely compatible with Christianity. I have written a book called Demystifying Reincarnation, where I talk about how reincarnation has acceptance in all the major traditions of the world across history and geography. Now, basically, what is the idea of reincarnation? It is that, say, we are spiritual beings. So, inside us, this is the body, and within that is the soul. So, at death, basically the body falls. But then the soul comes out. And then the soul goes through a journey and then it enters into a new body. So the soul entering into a new body is called reincarnation. To come incarnate, to come in flesh, to come again in flesh is reincarnation. Now, if the soul does not get a body soon, for whatever reason, then the soul exists in a disembodied state. And that is what is called as a ghost. But that's a different subject. Now, there are many cases of children who remember their past lives. Dr. Ian Stevenson was a pioneer in the study of this, and there are John Tucker and many others who have studied after that. So, they have noted that two people who lived at completely different places at different times, the second person remembers specific details of the person's previous life. So, that is in reincarnation studies or past life memory studies, they have found 4 levels of evidences. First is recollections. That a child recollects specific details. In my book on the reincarnation, I talk about how there's a case of the one boy, T2 Sharma. He is living in Lucknow and he says, my name is Suresh Sharma and I live in Kanpur. And I own an electrical shop. And then when he goes there, then the next stage is recognitions. When so T2 is a small, just 5-year-old boy, he's taken by his parents to Kanpur and he's never been there before, but he tells the Tonga, where should we go? And then when he goes there, there is actually a studio by the name Verma Electrical Studio. And there is a woman who is, and he says, she is my wife. Now she is much older than him. But he recognizes her by name. And then her children, the children are older than this boy, but he goes to them and fondles their hair, as if like a father fondling the hair of his children, ruffling the hair. And then, not only recognitions, there are behaviors. Behaviors means the person behaves not like the person from this life, but from the person from the previous life. So there are many cases of, say, people behaving completely different from their birth family and behaving as if from their previous family. This could be in terms of food preferences. This could be in terms of behavioral, this specific likes and dislikes. And then most strongly, there are birthmarks. So, this Suresh Verma had been killed point blank in an attack. So, a bullet had entered into his head from one side, one temple, and come out from the other side. So, T2 had birthmarks exactly at the same place in his body where the bullet marks had entered and departed. So, police investigation had been done because Suresh Verma had been murdered. And the post-mortem reports of Suresh Verma, when they compared where exactly was the entry wound and the exit wound, they found that exactly at the same locations, but T2 had birthmarks. So, these are all 4 converging lines of evidence which point to the reality of reincarnation. Thank you.
We have got so many questions. The next question is how this concept of science and spirituality help the youth generations of Sanatani, especially our Sanatani girls, are converting at an alarming rate.
Sorry.
Converting to other religion at an alarming rate.
I didn't get the last part of the question.
How this concept of science and spirituality help the youth generations of Sanatani, especially our Sanatani girls, as they are converting at an alarming rate.
Converting to what?
To other religion.
Well, from a practical perspective, there is a religious marketplace in the world. And whoever markets their religion better, people will be attracted to that. So what happened in the broad Vedic tradition is that when there were kings who were ruling, the kings would be patrons for the spiritual teachers, for the religious priests. So now the priestly infrastructure is still there. In terms of we have temples and priests. But the educational infrastructure, in terms of sharing spiritual wisdom, sharing the philosophy has been lost. So if there is no one sharing the spiritual wisdom of our tradition, people will be attracted to wisdom of other traditions. And worse still, if our tradition is presented simply as a set of rules which don't make sense, then people will adopt something else which seems to make more sense or seems to offer some social advantages. So it is, if we just take a scientific approach to this, scientific means we look at the practical factors that are there. I'd say that things are changing. What you are saying is true, but there are lots of people, especially when I go to America, UK, I find a lot of young people are also turning towards spirituality. And especially Indian spirituality. At their homes, their parents may tell them to chant some mantra, they will not chant. But when they go to college, and in the college there's a mantra meditation club. And there they learn about mantra chanting and they feel, hey, this is cool, I want to do this. So basically we need more and more educational initiatives. Okay.
If I don't believe in God, can I be a spiritual person? According to the philosophy of SIP, if I don't believe in God, can I be a spiritual person? According to the philosophy you provided, SIP.
SIP, okay. Okay. So now, many times when people say, I don't believe in God, what they have the idea is that everyone has a particular conception of God. And we are reacting to that conception of God. I was in America and one boy told me that, I don't believe in God. I was giving a college talk. And then he said, okay, so what is the conception of God you don't believe in? He said, no, I don't believe in any God. Okay, that's true. But tell me, what is the conception? He said, I don't believe in a God who sends you to hell, who sends people to hell just because they don't believe in him. So I said, even I don't believe in such a God. The Gita doesn't say such a conception of God. The Gita says hell is for wrongdoers, not non-believers. People can believe what they want. God gives us freedom to believe. But if we act in harmful and destructive ways, then that is what we are held accountable for. So basically, many people who say, I don't believe in God, if you just explore what is their conception of God that they are rejecting, then it is a conception of God which is quite distinct from the conception of the divine given in the Bhagavad Gita. So, to be spiritual means to be seeking something beyond the material, to at least be valuing it substantially. And when we value something beyond the material, then gradually we become more open to exploring what that non-material thing is. And then we may compare our conception of God with what is taught in the tradition, what is taught in scriptures, we can come to greater understanding. So I would say that the key characteristic of being spiritual is giving due importance to something beyond the material.
How can we remain mentally undisturbed by provoking situations?
To remain undisturbed in provoking situations, the more things change, the more we need to hold on to the things that don't change. So first of all, we need to have something that does not change. And then we need to be able to hold on to that thing. So for example, somebody whom we care for, that person behaves in a very disturbing way. Say we give a lot of importance to money. Our self-worth is equal to our net worth. And then as the stock market crashes, then we will be disturbed. So the key to not being disturbed is to be able to connect with the things that don't change. So spiritual practices like mantra chanting, like praying, these connect us with a divine reality who does not change. So basically I give the example of an anchor. We are all in this ocean. But the divine, earlier I depicted as the anchor. But actually divine is the anchor who extends throughout the ocean. And wherever we are, from there, we can just catch hold of the anchor. And to the extent we hold on to the anchor, to that extent we'll develop samatva. We'll become steady amidst duality. Okay.
Thanks for your nice lecture. To be spiritual, there are so many rules and regulations to maintain. How can we apply them in today's busy life?
See, the point of spirituality is not rules. The point of spirituality is a relationship. And relationship is developed by focusing on the personal connection. When we want to relate with a particular person, naturally, we'll try to understand what their likes are, what their dislikes are, and we'll align ourselves accordingly. So spirituality is about coming to harmony with ultimate reality. So rules, if you're only focusing on the rules, then they can seem restrictive. But all rules have a purpose. Like if you consider cricket as a sports, cricket has so many rules. The bowler has to bowl, but should not go beyond this line. The batsman has to bat, but the batsman has to hit the ball only when it is in this domain. After the batsman has hit the ball, and the ball has gone into the sky, and the fielder is coming to catch the ball. At that time, the bowler cannot go and hit the ball. Or the bowler cannot go and hit this fielder. You cannot do that. There are rules. But what happens is, within those rules, the bowler, the batsman, the fielder, they can all develop their skills and they can all excel. So rules are rules are not ends in themselves. Rules are for developing excellence and playing the sport. Similarly, in spirituality, the rules are meant for us to help develop the relationship, to come in greater harmony. As I said, to appreciate our gifts through inner connection and then to contribute in a mood of service using those gifts.
This world is so competitive nowadays.
Is so
competitive.
Complicated.
Okay. Competitive.
Competitive, yeah.
Okay. Obviously, our Sanatani culture and belief are much enriched and wholesome than any other religious belief. But our spiritual thoughts are not being able to combat the aggressive attitude of other religion, and our youths are easily being converted. Is it not our spiritual and modest ideology lagging us behind? Is it not our spiritual and modest ideology lagging us behind?
Modest or moral?
Modest.
Modest.
Ideology.
Well, again, as I said, conversion is a challenge. But we have to consider what is the cause of it. See, no other tradition in the world has been as attacked, both geopolitically and intellectually, as has been the Vedic tradition. In the Indian subcontinent, the Vedic tradition was there for a long time, but the Indian subcontinent is, you could say, geopolitically extremely vulnerable. Like I was in America for 3 months. America is uniquely geopolitically blessed in the history of the world. That means there's no enemies. Canada is not a hostile country. Mexico is not a very powerful country. And surrounded by oceans is protected. The Indian subcontinent is vulnerable from above. Although there are Himalayas, still there are passageways to the Himalayas people can attack. And from below also there are other land masses people can come by ships. So no other tradition has been as attacked as the Indian tradition. And the fact that it has survived in spite of that, that itself is remarkable. And no other tradition from classical or prehistorical times. If you go to Egypt today, there's nothing of the pharaohs and the Egyptian civilization there. If you go to Greece, there's nothing of the Greek civilization. Even modern China is very, very different from ancient China. There's hardly anything of Chinese civilization. So the Indian civilization has remarkable resilience. And that comes from its intrinsic spiritual strength. So we need to tap that strength and share that. So Swami Prabhupada, this picture we have over here, he was 70 years old when he decided that I want to share this spiritual wisdom with the world. At the age of 70, he left India and single-handedly he went to America with just 40 rupees. And within 10 years, just by his vigor to share spiritual wisdom and by his faith in the value of what he was sharing, he built over 108 temples. He wrote over 70 books. He went on a global tour circumnavigating the world 14 times. He inspired millions of people. So there is a lot of spiritual potency which is available right now. So rather than worrying too much about what other religions are doing and how they are converting, we need to focus more on understanding what is the actual teaching of our tradition and aligning our life according to it. The more we do that, the more people will be attracted to it.
We have some questions there.
Prabhu, I am basically a pediatrician, that is a physician pertaining to the child care. So my conflict is, while I teach my students about the early childhood development, that means we believe that childs are born with their genetic potential as dictated by the nature. Again, that will be translated into action with the environment he is being nurtured.
Yeah.
So that is called, there is a nature
Nature-nurture
nurture
debate, yeah.
interaction. So in that case, if I am born in a prostitution, I would not have been a doctor. It is assumed that. So what is the problem, and how do you really correlate these things, whether I was born earlier, had lot of mistakes to come to this world as a individual from prostitution. And that is one.
So you're using the word prostitution?
Yeah. I mean that
Okay, so
it is the environment.
Somebody's born in that kind of environment. Okay, I got it.
Just to say
No,
how we are being born.
I didn't hear the word clearly. Go ahead. please.
I-
So basically, the nature nurture is a very important subject, and it is true that people are shaped by both. Now, what you're saying is true, that if somebody is born in a bad neighborhood, no, it's very likely that their life is going to go on a dark pathway. But it is not always like that. Some of the most inspiring stories in human history are of people who were born in terrible circumstances and those who rose above those adversities. So, while nurture does play a significant role, nurture is alone is not necessarily destiny. Nurture alone does not determine our future. It definitely determines our future, but not alone. Similarly, nature alone, it does not determine our future. We all have a particular nature, but we can discipline our nature. Some kid might be born with a very aggressive nature, short-tempered, fighting, aggressive. But if the child hangs out with or is brought up by people who are moderately behaved, who are restrained, that will rub off. Maybe not entire character will change, but nature can be, I said, it can be disciplined. It cannot be completely changed, but it can be disciplined for strength. And so people who are aggressive, if they also have certain level of discipline, then that aggression can help them to become protectors instead of just attackers and disruptors. So now what the Gita says is that each one of us has some karmic baggage that we carry from our previous life. So this, if this is birth and this is death. Now we have existed before this. We had a death and we had a birth. And we'll have another birth and then another death. So like this, there is multi-life progression. And what you talk about the genetic potential, that in one sense from our previous lives, we get a certain level of daiva or destiny. The same idea is talked about in different traditions by different names. It's called as Kishmet in the Arabic tradition, Kismet. It is called as Shibboleth or something like that in Japanese. Many things are there. So now what the Vedic tradition says is that a major installation of destiny, of past karma, comes to us at birth. That birth means that, as you said, the kind of genes that we have, the kind of complexion that we have, the kind of IQ level that we have. Now IQ level can definitely be improved, but it's very difficult for somebody, if they have a starting level of 70, to go to 140. From 120, somebody can go to 140, 150, something like that. But there is a starting point. And then similarly, by our karma, by the destiny that is basically resulting from our karma from previous lives, there are certain events in our life that are fixed. So the kind of environment in which we'll grow up, that to some extent is fixed. So that's where the nurture aspect comes in. But within that environment, whom do we focus on? So beyond both of nature and nurture, there is free will. Now destiny may determine the complexion of our face. Some people may have dark complexion, some people may have fair complexion, some people may have in between, whatever. Somebody may have blonde hair, somebody may have black hair. So destiny determines our complexion, but we determine the expression on our face. And even a face which does not have a very attractive complexion, if the person is cheerful, they look attractive. Now, destiny may determine again the broad kind of people in which we grow up. But within that community, whom do we focus on? Whom do we spend more time with? That's up to us. Somebody may have very loving parents, but they may have a bitter cousin or a bitter uncle, and they spend more time with that person, or they take more from that person and they become bitter. Or somebody may have very neglectful parents, but they may have a caring grandmother and they may take more from their grandmother. So within nurture, it is that there are different people who are nurturing in different ways. And the individual has free will whom they focus on. And conversely, even the caregivers, those who are giving nurture also, they also have free will. And sometimes the parents will just complain about life, my life is so unfortunate, this person did this to me, and that person did that to me, and that person did that to me. And that influence will go on to the children. But if the parents make the best of what they have, the children will get that. So basically, we all have, so the nature and the nurture situations of that, both of them are determined by our destiny, which is determined by our past karma, which is determined by our use of free will. And we also have free will right now. The margin of free will may be small or big depending on the situation, but we always have some free will. And to the extent we use it well, we will find that we can create a brighter future for ourselves. And our free will, it can be boosted. It can be strengthened by divine will. So if we practice bhakti, if we connect with God, then whatever free will we have, it becomes much stronger. And that's how we can transcend or rise above our situations. Okay.
Thank you for the explanation, though I feel it is completely based on faith rather than scientifically proven mechanism. Anyway.
Okay, now let me address this point. See, there is faith required even in science. Because science, you can say it operates based on evidence. But we have not studied all of humanity. We study a particular sample, and based on that, we project, we infer, we induct. We use the method of induction. So, whether our future induction will be true or not, that is an article of faith. So, faith is required even in science. When we took the vaccines, some testing was done, but that does not mean that in the future those vaccines will not have some other counterproductive effects. So faith is required even in science. Now, is faith required in spirituality? Of course. But it is not completely faith. It is faith coupled with, in science you may have physical evidence in terms of case studies. In spirituality, there is reason and logic. So, basically, we notice that there are different starting points for people. Now, why are there different starting points? We could basically have three explanations. One is that just life is a game of chance. And some people are lucky and some people are unlucky. Well, okay, that is a possibility. But that is not the way we function within this life. No parent tells their children, whether you wash your teeth or you don't wash your teeth, still your teeth are going to get destroyed. No parent teaches their children that whether you make your bed or don't make your bed, life is going to be the same. No, we operate based on an implicit acceptance of cause-effect. So, if during life we operate based on cause-effect, then why? At the start of life, there should be no cause effect. There should be only chance, blind chance. So basically, the starting conditions of life, we can explain them in one way is chance. But that is inconsistent with how we function in life. Now the other explanation could be divine will, or more precisely, divine caprice, God's arbitrary will. God has decided this person should be like this person should be like that. But then, why does God discriminate like this? And if God discriminates arbitrarily by getting some children to be born in wealthy families and some in poor families, then why should we even such a worship such a discriminatory God? How can we love and trust a being who is so discriminatory? So this basically alienates us from God. And in fact, when the choice is between chance and arbitrary divine will, many thoughtful people will choose chance and become atheistic. But that is one of the main that is one of the main reasons why atheism is growing in the Western world. Because as people become more thoughtful, the dogmas of the kind of religion which says that everything is determined by God's arbitrary will, that is utterly alienating. But what the Vedic tradition offers us is that there is karma and progression. So our starting point is determined by the place where we left in the previous life. It's like if a cricket match is going on and say one team starts right in the beginning with a score of 200. Say, why is this team starting with 200? One explanation could be that the scoreboard operates chaotically. And it's by chance this team got a 200 score. But that's not the way we function. During the innings, only when a batsman scores, then the scoreboard grows. So at the starting it's arbitrary. The second could be that the scorekeeper is biased. The scorekeeper arbitrarily decides that this should be the starting score. The third and most reasonable explanation is that it is not the first innings. The team which seems to have a starting score of 200 has scored more in the previous innings. So basically, when we look at the world as it exists, the idea of a previous life and continuation from the previous life is the most reasonable explanation for it. Now, does it involve faith? Of course. But is it based only on faith? Certainly not. It is a logical, the most logical explanation of what would otherwise be completely unexplainable. Okay?
My question is, actually we came from the, it is told that by the Stephen Hawking and others, that we came from one infinite power in a very small center of, then we had been to the existence, and it is a sort of expansion. That is Big Bang theory. So if you try to correlate in that way, probably the philosophy of evolution goes better than the physiology of belief. So you'll have to rethink on the basis, because the scientists are not in a point to admit the fact of the faith, because they are the believer that can be experimented, intervened, and will come with an evidence to be repeated and reproduced. So we will have to be scientific, number one.
Yes, let me address this point. Thank you. See, with this, good questions really. So science has 3 different methods for determining its theories. One is deductive, the second is inductive, and the third is abductive. So deductive means, for example, it's math. So 3 plus 9 is 12. It's deduced based on the very principles of mathematics. Now very little in the physical world can be actually deduced, because real life, its messy complexity is not just about numbers. So most of science operates based on inductive logic or inductive reasoning, where we do a certain number of experiments and based on that we infer this is the law operating over here. So when Newton saw an apple falling, he postulated the idea of gravity, and based on that he did repeated experiments. So others did repeated experiments. Does a stone fall? Does this fall not just in London but in Paris also, in other parts of the world? So there's repeated experiments. And this is where science has had the most success, even phenomenal success. The sound system, the internet, air transportation. However, when it comes to origins, origin of the universe, origin of life, origin of species, science cannot use the inductive method. The origin of the universe is a one-time event. There is no possibility for doing repeated experiments to evaluate how things happen. Origin of species, origin of life, these are all one-time events that have happened. Now we can speculate and guess about what kind of conditions were there and how those things may have happened at that time. But we really don't know exactly what kind of conditions were there. And we don't really know when those conditions interact at that scale, what would happen. So my point is, abductive reasoning is highly tentative. So what happens, this is sometimes an honest mistake and sometimes a dishonest mistake. Honest mistake is that the credit that is due to science because of its success through theories made using inductive reasoning, that same credit is applied to theories deduced using abductive reasoning. So Big Bang theory, there is no experiment to replicate that from happening. Even origin of life or origin of species, there is no experiment specifically to replicate that. So theories made using abductive reasoning, they are basically like a mystery novel, somebody deducing how did this murder happen. So you cannot tell the criminal, please come and commit the murder again and we'll catch you in action. So theories of science, which are developed during using abductive reasoning, they need to be seen with due caution. Like say you are as you said, you are a pediatrician. Now there are medicines which have been well tested and there are experimental medicines. Now sometimes if a child is really sick and there is no medicine available, then you may recommend some experimental medicine as treatment. But you have a moral duty and a professional duty to tell the patients or the patient's parents that this is experimental medicine. It may work, but it involves some unpredictable risks also. And then the patients should be given willing consent to that kind of experimental medicine. So theories like Big Bang or evolution, they need to come with that kind of disclaimer that the same credibility that comes to theory of gravity or to fluid mechanics and the laws of thermodynamics, that cannot be applied to these theories. So they fall in a different category and they need to be seen with due skepticism. Now having said that, these are talking both, whether these theories are true or false, they are talking about how matter formed. They're not talking about how consciousness emerged. There is no satisfactory explanation. The theory of evolution in terms of biological evolution may have some evidence. But a theory of evolution in terms of chemical evolution, how consciousness emerged from matter, that has very, very little evidence. The Science magazine in its 125th anniversary published an article about 125 questions that science doesn't have answers to. The second question over there was, what is the origin of consciousness? The first question was, what is the origin of the universe? So what Dawkins proposes as singularity from which something emerges, that is his theory. That is, but if you consider mainstream scientists, the origin of the universe and origin of consciousness, these are unexplored, these are unanswered questions. And there is a lot more to explore within that. So the spiritual explanations or the explanation from the Vedic traditions or other traditions, these are also worth exploring. Rather than presuming that certain scientific theories are necessarily true, when even mainstream science acknowledges that these are unanswered questions.
Another query is that whether is the soul, it is said in Gita, it is not perceivable, not expressible. soul. So which is not perceived, which is not expressible, how can you really have faith on it? Number one. And I had last question to you.
Okay, let me complete this about, and in the Gita is saying that it is not perceivable.
Perceived, yes.
Okay.
The Sanskrit is like this, abang manusho gocharo. That means it cannot be expressed, it cannot be perceived, according to Gita.
Okay,
So-
now that particular point, now that particular phrase doesn't come in the Gita. It might come in some other books. The Gita does talk about certain aspects of the soul, achintyoyam, avikaryoyam. It talks about like that. Now, what it means is important. Like I said, that there is something, like science itself says that we go from visible phenomena to invisible principles. So the Gita also says that in the search for identity, in the understanding of who we are, we need to go beyond our visible roles. So you are a doctor, you are probably a father, you are maybe you are a son, not maybe you are a son. We all have different roles. But is there a core to us beyond our roles? That's the question that the Gita is exploring. And it says that this core itself cannot be pursued by externals. Now we all have our roles, but no, some people not like to be reduced to their roles. Yeah, I'm a parent, I'm a Bangladeshi citizen, but there is so much more to me than just these roles. So when the Gita says the soul is not perceivable, what it means is through the externals we identify ourselves with certain roles, but the core of us is beyond these roles. Now, when it says it cannot be perceived, it means that simply by our senses, it cannot be perceived. But with our intelligence, jnana chakshu, with the eyes of wisdom, utkramantam sitam vapi punjanam gunanvitam vimudhananu pashyanti jnana chakshushaha. With the eyes of wisdom, we can perceive it. So like that, whether it is the principle, now we can talk about gravity can be perceived, but in science, there is the idea of dark matter. Dark matter, or in science, there is the idea of parallel universes. Now, parallel universes, by their very definition, they cannot be perceived. But then there is some mathematical inference by which their existence has been postulated. And those scientists who are postulating it are not just engaging in free imagination. They're doing some reasoning. So the Gita is saying that it cannot be perceived in the sense that with our senses, with what is visible, we can't perceive it. But with intelligence, we can. So, I was in Canada, I spoke at the Toronto University. So there is a research center for dedicated Dr. Wilder Penfield. He's considered the father of modern neuroscience, especially neurosurgery. So he wrote several books, one of which is The Mystery of the Mind. And there he gives an experiment which led him to conclude that consciousness does not have a material or a cerebral origin. So what was the experiment he did? That now we know different parts of the brain are connected with different physical functions. So there's a part of the brain, say the parietal lobe or whatever, is connected with the motor nervous system. So he asked a subject to raise his hand. And when the subject raised his hand, under neural imaging, they saw that a particular part of the brain had got activated. And he asked the subject to lower his hand. And that part of the brain got deactivated. Now, using electrodes, he activated that part of the brain. And then the subject's hand went up. And then he asked the subject, what happened? He said, my hand went up. And he asked the subject more specific, did you raise your hand? He said, no, I didn't raise my hand. He says, you raised my hand. Then he deactivated that part of the probe. That probe, and the hand fell down. He says, did you lower your, what happened? He says, my hand fell down. Did you lower your hand? He said, no, I didn't. Now, Dr. Penfield, he repeated this experiment while simultaneously activating other parts of the brain. He wanted to see whether there is any part of the brain when it is activated, gives the patient, gives the subject, the sense of agency that I am acting. So when different parts of the brain were activated, the subject remembered some childhood food that they eaten, maybe they had played some games, some conversation they had years ago. Many stimuli came up. But no part of the brain when activated gave a sense of agency to the subject. So the idea is to explain in analog terms, that say if this is my computer and here there's a printer next to me. Now I can press the print button over here and then the printer's hand will start moving. Now you can come and you can press the print button and then the print hand will start moving. So in Penfield's experiment, in the second case, it was he, Dr. Penfield, who pressed the print button. Press the print button. The print button is like the center of the brain which is associated with the motor nervous system, which causes the hand to go up and down. So now his question is, who pressed the print button in the first case? Who is it that is saying that I didn't press it in the second case? So no matter how much he probed the brain, he couldn't find that. So therefore he concluded that the source of consciousness is extracerebral. The mind is like the brain is like a computer, but it is programmed by something outside of itself. So there are not scientific, I would say, proof, but there are scientific pointers toward the idea of consciousness coming from something beyond matter. Okay.
Last question is that, do you suggest a society of law or a society of spirituality to be interrelated, to be present for a very conducive society? I feel it is
law
not
or law? L-A-W?
Law, L-A-W.
L-A-W, yes. Okay, good point. See, actually, spirituality recognizes that law is essential. See, one of the things about spirituality is that it says we humans have a higher nature and we have a lower nature. So the higher nature is what needs to be developed. This needs to be developed. But at the same time, the lower nature needs to be disciplined. And traditionally, there are two aspects to society, social management. So the higher nature is developed through Shastra. And the lower nature is disciplined through Shastra. Shastra is wisdom. Shastra is weapons. So now, there will be a small and significant minority in whom the higher nature is more prominent. And for them, Shastra, wisdom is vital. And they will themselves realize how acting according to morality, acting according to spirituality is in their best interests. But there are many in whom the lower nature is prominent. And for them, Shastra in terms of wisdom alone will not work. And that's why Shastra is required. So when the Bhagavad Gita described that the avatar descends to this world, the avatar uses Shastra. The avatar also gives wisdom, Shastra. So wisdom and weapons, both are required, Shastra and Shastra. So spirituality is not just about spiritual, it is also about recognizing the reality of the material. And that means people with lower nature will need law to regulate themselves. However, if society is governed only by laws, then people will keep finding loopholes to get out of the laws. So laws need a purpose, a vision. And that vision is not just order in this world. It is also some higher purpose beyond this world. So Shastra and Shastra both go together. Okay. Thank you. Very good questions.
Hello. Thank you.
Dear Orient, I have an announcement.
Yeah.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Sorry, we have scanty of time, so we think we will not be able to take all the questions. I have an announcement for all of you. We have 3 books available written by our Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, translated into Bengali, available at the front desk. আর্থিক সংকটে কিভাবে সুখে থাকা যায়, আমাদের মন্দির প্রয়োজন কেন, why do we need a temple, and energy, shakti. These 3 books are available at the front desk. If you need, you can collect those. And we will move to our next questions. We will not be taking much questions. There was a question. We will take the question, but there is also a question. I request all of you to have patience, please. Prabhu, we got a question like, do we really need a guru or organization to practice spirituality?
Okay. So, do we need a guru organization? See, guru is a person who is essentially has gone on the spiritual path. Like in every field, if you are serious, if somebody is in athletics, they want a coach who will help them grow on that path. So, same principle applies in the spiritual domain. Now, as far as the organization is concerned, essentially, what is an organization? It is made of individuals. So, the example is given that see, each one of us, we are like a trickle of water. And say if there is a large mountain and then there is an ocean over here. So now from the mountain, the water is coming down. Now there could be many obstacles on the way. So now each small trickle of water, maybe it can come all the way down to the ocean. But if many trickles of water come together to form a tributary, the tributaries come together to form a river, then the river has a far greater chance of getting to the ocean. The river will eventually form a bed. By the flow of the river itself will form a bed, and that will make it easier for the water to go towards the ocean. So each individual who wants to practice spirituality is like that trickle of water. And they want to get to the ocean. That is the ultimate spiritual destination. So now, when spiritually minded people come together, at that time, they form an organization. Just like coming together is an organization. But unfortunately, whenever there's an organization, like whenever there is water flowing smoothly in large quantity, there will be people who will come and form a dam. Now, they are not interested in going to the river. They are interested in tapping the water for their own purposes. So like that, when a community of spiritually minded people come together and they create some infrastructure, they create some resources so that everybody can go on the spiritual journey smoothly. There are people with vested interests who come. They're not interested in spirituality. And they want to use those facilities for their own purposes. Such people give spiritual organization a bad name. So on one side, organizations, on a negative side, they can have rigid hierarchy which can interrupt the spiritual growth of individuals. It can have selfish, self-interested people who can exploit. But on a positive side, organization can also provide rich facilities for spiritual growth. So anybody can pray to God, but if there's a temple, then there is a whole atmosphere which directs our consciousness higher. And now, if there is a substantially big temple, there has to be some organization to maintain that temple. So in this world, organization is a necessary evil. And when we join an organization, if we decide to join an organization, it's important that we remember the purpose why we are there. So we are like joining the river so that we can get to the ocean. We're not joining the river so that we can build a dam and we can block that water from going ahead. So if we keep our purpose clear, then the organization can become a very rich resource. It can provide us many resources for our spiritual growth.
Dear audience, as we have scanty of time, we will be taking last 2 questions. One question is raised from this side, and another from this side. We will be taking last 2 questions. 3 questions. Will we be able to take all the three questions, as our guests are very busy, and we also need to think of their time. Let's start with that question, please.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, to me, the whole world is nothing but a summation of millions of chemical reactions and millions of rules of physics. Some of them are known to us, and most of them are unknown to us. The very few which are known to us, we are calling them as we are practicing science. We are the so-called science that we are calling that. We are know something about the science. Actually, these are very few millions of chemical reactions and millions of rules of physics that is happening in the whole universe. And the question is that we are calling science, and we are knowing that in a particular way of learning, and that is the way of learning through some Western methods of learning. We are going to some schools and some universities, some colleges. Now my question is that so far I know you are an engineer. Okay, you have directed yourself from engineering to the way of spirituality. I am also in a profession, but I am not telling that I am not away from spirituality, but I am practicing spirituality in my own way. But you are far ahead from me. So my question is, if I also convert myself from my profession to the way of spirituality like you, so millions of that chemical reactions happening in the universe, or in the millions of rules of physics that's happening in the universe, how I can align my spirituality like you to the knowing of that chemical reactions or that rules of physics? How can I know that? That you have set some examples of science, and my teacher, Professor Julan Das Sharma, also have set some examples of science, like examples of Newton, that apple is falling from the tree, or rules of Stephen Hawking.
Yes.
So how can spirituality can help, or by the way of spirituality, how can you know that particular way of science?
Okay,
It is my
good question. Thank you. So essentially, there is a notion of spirituality where we turn away from the world and we neglect or reject the world. Well, that is not as like I talk about spirituality, we have been given some gifts and we are meant to use those gifts. So for me, as I said, even before I was introduced to spirituality, I was interested in the power of education. And in one sense, now I'm doing what I was meant to do. I'm sharing spiritual education. The content of what I'm sharing has evolved with time, but essentially I'm doing what I'm meant to do. So each one of us, wherever we are, we can find out what gifts we have, what nature we have in terms of what are our natural inclinations, and we try to dovetail them. And in fact, if you consider, a spiritual view is actually the most conducive for scientific research. And a non-spiritual or an atheistic view is actually the least conducive for scientific research. Why is that? Because, like you said, the universe is rich with so many laws that are unexplored. So now, if we came across, if we're in archaeology, and we came across some patterns on some wall that was discovered after digging. Now, if we presume, oh, these are just random marks that have come from nature, then we wouldn't explore them any further. But if we knew that these are indications, these marks are scripts of some ancient language, then we would focus with more energy. Okay, what does this mean? What does this scribbling mean? What does this particular symbol mean? So basically the idea that the universe is pregnant with meaning is most compatible with the idea that the universe has some organizing principle within it. So if the universe is just a random product in its entirety, is there randomness in the universe? Of course. But if the universe is completely a random product, then even the very existence of laws itself, it's a question. Because in the rigidly materialistic worldview, where do the laws that science is discovering come from? That is itself an unanswered question. It's taken like an article of faith that the universe operates based on laws. But what is the origin of these laws? So that is open to question. The point I'm making is, if we have a spiritual worldview, then we understand that the universe has an organizing principle behind it, and we can explore that organizing, the way the universe has been organized, with greater confidence and greater energy. Newton famously said that, "O Father, I think thy thoughts after thee." What he meant by that is, he saw his scientific discoveries as spiritual insights into how God has fashioned the universe. So, in that sense, a spiritual worldview can actually help us to do scientific research. We see that it is the higher reality, it is the divine who has filled meaning in the universe, and it's that divine who has given us intelligence by which we can discover that meaning. Okay?
Dear audience, we need to conclude the question and answer session. We are extremely sorry for that. We have a request. You are given with a feedback form. Please complete the feedback form, please. Some of us already left the hall without submitting the feedback form. You are requested to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, we are thrilled to listen to Chaitanya Charan Prabhu for his valuable insights about science and spirituality. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. May I take the pleasure of calling here Dr. Ramando Parial, Associate Professors, Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, University of Chittagong, to share his short realization with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me here to share my something about today's seminar. I'm really impressed to get the chance to participate in this seminar and listening to our Prabhu and getting some important information, direction of life, to how to lead the life to spirituality. The SIF theory, I think it's a marvelous theory to lead our life and connect our life with God who has created us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to request Dr. Bidhan Roy, Professor, Department of Pediatrics, USTC, to share his realization.
হরে কৃষ্ণ। প্রকৃতপক্ষে আমি খুবই অভিভূত এবং আমি খুব স্যাটিসফাইড। আমি যদিও স্পিরিচুয়াল লাইফ নিয়ে একটু চর্চা করছি, কিন্তু এরকম সেমিনারে অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমি এই প্রথম আছি। যদিও বিভিন্ন ধর্মীয় সেমিনার হয়, কিন্তু এইভাবে বিজ্ঞান ভিত্তিক আলোচনা আমি এখানে আসলে প্রথম এসেছি। তো এখানে অনেক জ্ঞানী গুণী ব্যক্তি আছেন, যার মধ্যে প্রফেসর ঝুলন দাস শর্মার কথা আমি উল্লেখ করতে চাই, যিনি আমার সম্পর্কে মামা। আবার আমি যখন ডিসিএস করি, তিনি আমার টিচারও ছিলেন, ডাইরেক্ট টিচার ছিলেন, আমার পরীক্ষাও নিয়েছেন। পাশাপাশি অনেক ডাক্তার, ইঞ্জিনিয়ার এখানে আছেন। তো প্রকৃতপক্ষে যেখানে যা আমি বুঝতে পেরেছি, SIP জিনিসটা আমরা আশা করি আমি আর বলার দরকার মনে করছি না। তবে এই আধ্যাত্মিকতা যদি চর্চা করতে হয় তাহলে অবশ্যই ভগবদ্গীতার একটা শ্লোক আমি বলতে চাই, যেটা বিজ্ঞান যোগের প্রথম শ্লোক। ভগবান কি বলছেন? মজ্জাশক্ত মনাপার্থ যোগন যুঞ্জন মদাশ্রয়। অর্থাৎ পরমেশ্বর ভগবান যে আছেন তাকে বিশ্বাস করে, তার আশ্রয় গ্রহণ করে, তার শরণাগত হয়ে এই বিজ্ঞান যোগটা আমাদেরকে বুঝতে হবে। এই বিশ্বাসটুকু আপনি সায়েন্স বুঝতে হলেও প্রভু বলছেন হ্যাঁ সেখানে আপনাকে বিশ্বাস লাগবে, ঠিক আধ্যাত্মিকতা বুঝতে হলেও আপনার আশ্রয় গ্রহণ করতে হবে, সেই পরম তত্ত্বের আশ্রয় গ্রহণ করতে হবে। আপনারা এখানে যারা আসছেন সবাই অবশ্যই আমি মনে করি যে আপনারা পরমেশ্বর ভগবান বিশ্বাস করেন। তবে সেটা হতে পারে নিরাকার, সেটা হতে পারে সাকার, যাই হোক না কেন। ভাগবতে এই সম্পর্কে বলা হয়েছে বদন্তি তত্ত্ববিদ তত্ত্বম যজ্ঞান অদ্বয়ম ব্রহ্মেতি পরমাত্মেতি ভগবানেতি শব্দতে। অর্থাৎ সেই পরম তত্ত্ব নিরাকার যদি বলেন তাও ঠিক, আপনি যদি পরমাত্মাকে ভগবান মানেন তাও ঠিক, এবং পরমেশ্বর ভগবানকেও যদি ভগবান মানেন তাও ঠিক। সেই পরম তত্ত্ব অথবা সেই পরম সত্য অথবা সেই পরমেশ্বর ভগবানের আশ্রয় নিয়ে যদি আপনি বিজ্ঞান চর্চা করেন তাহলে অবশ্যই ধীরে ধীরে আপনি নিঃসংশয় হতে পারবেন। আপনার সংশয় অবশ্যই থাকবে, ধীরে ধীরে সেটা চলে যাবে, এবং তখনই প্রভু যেটা বললেন পিউরিটি, সেই শুদ্ধতা আমরা লাভ করতে পারবো, এবং তার মাধ্যমেই এই মানব জীবনের উদ্দেশ্যটা আমরা সফল করতে পারবো। আপনি যতই শাস্ত্র অধ্যয়ন করবেন, উপনিষদ অধ্যয়ন করবেন, বেদ অধ্যয়ন করবেন, দেখবেন একটা কথা কিন্তু আছে, এই মানুষ জীবন, মনুষ্য জন্ম খুবই দুর্লভ, কিন্তু এটা ক্ষণস্থায়ী। এই মনুষ্য জীবনের পরে, যেটা এখন ভিডিওতেও দেখলাম, আমরা কোন জন্ম পাবো তার কোনো নিশ্চয়তা নেই। অতএব এই মানব জীবনটা যদি আমরা সফল করতে চাই, এখনই সময় পরমেশ্বর ভগবানের উপর বিশ্বাস রেখে এইভাবে আপনি বিশ্লেষণের মাধ্যমেও আপনার জীবনটা সফল করতে পারেন। পরিশেষে আমি আবার সবাইকেও কৃতজ্ঞতা জানাচ্ছি আয়োজকদের পক্ষ থেকে, এবং আমি অনুরোধ করব যেন প্রভু চৈতন্য চরণ প্রভু, ওনাকে আমি দণ্ডবোধ প্রণতি নিবেদন করছি, and I requesting you please make some program each and every year to come here and to enlighten us by this fund. অনেক ধন্যবাদ, থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ।